Hi, welcome to my channel Cloud with Girish. In the previous video workshop, I demonstrated how to secure your CloudFront distribution or website using AWS WAF. I also showed how to send custom response code and messages using AWS WAF and how to rate limit an API endpoint with WAF. If you missed it, be sure to check out the tutorial linked in the description before continuing. In this video, I will demonstrate another use case, implementing a rate limit rule using the URI path. By using the URI path in a scope down statement, you gain fine-grained control over where the rate limit applies. For example, you can limit requests to a login page, a payment page, or post method specific API endpoint while excluding other content retrieval or get related API endpoint from the rate limit. We will apply AWS WAF with the rate limit rule to a REST API endpoint exposed via AWS API Gateway. The WAF will evaluate the rule and either allow or block the API request based on the rule. The rate limit will be enforced using the URI path in the scope down statement. If a request exceeds the rate limit, AWS WAF will return a 403 forbidden status code. Let's look at our business use case. Business use case is to implement a rate limit rule using URI path. We apply rate limit to only create contact API endpoint. All other API endpoints like retrieving contacts or updating contacts should not have this rate limit applied. If rate limit rule is triggered, return 403 forbidden response. I will be creating the AWS WAF, WABACL and rule using AWS console. However, you can create the AWS WAF rules using CloudFormation as well. Let's look at our architecture here. We have the consumer that is invoking the API, which is hosted via AWS API Gateway, and it has a Lambda function integrated, and Lambda function in turn is invoking a DynamoDB that has the contact related data stored. We are protecting the API endpoint using the AWS WAF, and we have a rate limit rule applied. However, we are also adding a scope down statement with URI path to meet the use case that only one of the endpoint which is related to a post request or a create a new contact will be restricted using this rule, while the other endpoints like getting the data or updating the data will not be impacted by this rule. Prereq for this, just to ensure that you have reviewed the prior workshop on AWS WAF, link is in the description. So you will see multiple workshop there, like how to secure your CloudFront distribution or website using AWS WAF, or how to send custom response code, or how to implement a rate limit using AWS WAF. Let's get started. We're going to do a quick review of AWS WAF service. We'll look at the key resources to protect. We'll set up the rule for rate limit, and then we will apply a scope down statement for URI path as well. We will associate it with the AWS resource, which is AWS API Gateway in this case, and then we'll validate the solution. We'll run the request through the postman, and once the rate limit rule trigger along with the URI path condition, it should provide us 403 forbidden message. Once we are done with this workshop, then we'll do a resource cleanup. We'll remove our association, delete the rule, delete the WABACL, and so on. And this is just to make sure that we don't have ongoing charges for these resources in cloud. So let's look at the WAF service. AWS WAF is a fully managed web application firewall service provided by AWS. It simplifies the process of protecting the web resources by allowing you to define web ACL, the access control list, and custom rules, or by using pre-configured rule from the AWS marketplace. Once set up, AWS WAF safeguard your web application based on the specified rule. The key component of WAF are web ACL, rules, and rules group. Now, multiple rules can be applied and the priority of those rules can be adjusted if you have multiple rules. Rule action can be allow, block, count, and few others. Rule group is a collection of rules. We can build our own rule group, or we can buy pre-built rule group from Amazon Marketplace. Now, of course, if we're buying pre-built group, there is a cost associated with that. Nothing is free. So in this case, assess for your use case, benefit, and pricing. These are the services which are supported by AWS WAF at the time of creating this video in October of 2024. So CloudFront, API Gateway, Application Load Balancer, Cognito User Pool, AppSync, and App Runner are the services which are supported by AWS WAF. As you can see in this diagram, there are various use cases that we can fulfill by attaching AWS WAF with any of these supported resources. So let's talk about a few of the use cases that we can support by using the AWS WAF. So some of the use cases are, one popular one is the protect from DDoS attack at a layer 7 level. There is another service that AWS provides, the AWS Shield Advanced, and that is used for DDoS protection at layer 3. Implement geo restriction. We can build rule around implementing IP restriction, implement the rate limit for API or any other resource for that matter, protection from SQL injection, and several other use cases. Since we're talking about layer 7 and layer 3, I thought that I provide a quick review of OSI layer that I'm sure that if you are in computer engineering field, you probably remember the OSI layer from your engineering classes. There are 7 layers starting from physical layer all the way to application layer. So layer 3 is the network layer, and that's where in the previous slide I was showing that another AWS service, that AWS Shield Advanced, that provide protection at a network layer level. The AWS WAF, which we are using in this example, provide the protection at a application layer. Let's also look at like URI path, just so we clear that what exactly URI means. So URI path is a part of web address called a URI or URL that points to a specific resource or page on a server. So it comes right after the domain name and tells the server what information or resources you are trying to access. Typically, there are 4 parts of the URI. So it looks like a scheme, authority, path, query. An example URL path is that you have the scheme, which is in this case HTTPS API-endpoint.com, which could be whatever domain or API address that we are providing, / the resource path. So that's like dev / create contact. And if there is a get related request, then of course there can be an optional parameter for query where we provide the query string. So that's a typical URI path. I wanted to show an example of it. Now let's dig down into the web service. So to meet our use case, let's configure the web ACL and rule for the use case. So first thing first, we'll go to the AWS console and we'll look for the web service, and from there we'll click on create web ACL or web ACL, right? When we are creating, we will have two options. Either we can select the CloudFront distribution, or we can select the regional resources. In this case, because we want to put WAF in front of the AWS API Gateway, I'm going to select the regional resources, and I'm selecting it in the US East region. I'm going to give a name, create contact API rate limit ACL, and I have a description which is optional here. Next, we will create the rule, and again, we have two options. We can pick a manage rule, or we can create our own rule. So in this case, I'm selecting add my own rule and rule group from this drop down. First thing first, I will select how the rule type that I'm building. So in this case, I'm building rule builder, and I'm creating providing a name, the create contact API rate limit rule. And then the type of the rule, I can either have a regular rule or a rate based rule. So here since I'm applying a rate limit, I'm selecting a rate based rule. Also, like, I have the option to use a visual editor, or I can simply type JSON. So in this scenario, I'm going to use the visual editor. Now let's continue to build the rule, and we're gonna provide our rate limit condition here. So my rate limit, I'm using the minimum that AWS allow, which is 10 requests per minute. So this is like recently AWS had added more option here. Until few months back, we only had the option of like minimum rate needed to be like 100 and a 5-minute window, but now we have like 10 minutes, and then also have option to pick from not only 5 minutes but 1 minute, 2 minute, 10 minute, and so on, right? So I'm gonna pick 1 minute in this example. So I have 10 requests every 60 seconds. And then because I want to use the URI path, I'm going to select the custom key from the next option here. And then I'm going to select URI path from there for the aggregation key. And then I'm going to add my rule. The second aggregation here is the source IP address. And then I am also providing the condition that URI path should match to create contact. So what that means is that in my URI path, if I have create contact, then this rule should apply. But if I have like get contact or update contact or delete contact, then this rule will not apply. So the rate limit will not apply to those API endpoints. So here in the action, I'm selecting block because the use case is to block if our rule condition meets. And then this, we are looking at the WCU. So these get consumed depending on how complex your rule is. And in this scenario is saying, hey, by configuring this rule, you are consuming 64 WCU from the allowed 5,000. So next we need to select a action for the scenario where requests don't match any configured rule. So here I'm going to say allow. So if my rule is not met, then I'm going to say allow, because I don't want my other get action and another endpoint get blocked by providing a universal block here. And then again, if I had multiple rules, then I could have adjusted the priority of those rules, but I only have one rule in this scenario. So in the next few steps, we can just configure CloudWatch metrics and request sampling, and then we will be done to create this rule. We'll review the configuration and we'll create the WebACL. Once it's created and ready to use, then we can associate it with a resource. So in this example, I'm associating it with my API, which is hosted in the AWS API Gateway, and my API is contact API in development. So that's what I'm associating it with. Wait for the message to see that you have successfully updated and the WebACL and the distribution. Once you have it, that means it's all set up and we are ready to take the next step, which is basically validating to make sure that WAF is working as designed. So in this scenario, I'm going to invoke the API endpoint using the Postman. You can use any API tool of your choice. And I'm going to send the multiple requests so that rule get triggered. So in this example, if you see my URL or URI actually has the create contact. That means when the rule get evaluated, it will find this match and the rule will trigger. So in this scenario, if I invoke my API endpoint over 10 times, then I should see that rate limit rule is getting triggered, and then we will start to see 403 forbidden responses, and that's exactly what I'm getting in this example. So once we are good, that rule is working and we understand the concepts, just make sure that we clean up, delete the resources so that you don't incur charges in your AWS account. So we should remove the CloudFront AWS API Gateway association or any association that we have created, delete the rules, delete the ACL. So that way you will ensure that you are not getting like ongoing charges for using these resources. So with this workshop, we have successfully demonstrated how to implement a simple rate limit rule for the URI path using AWS WAF. We used a scope down statement to further fine tune the rate limit rule that I demonstrated in the previous example. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm constantly working on new content covering various AWS topics. So please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Cloud with Girish channel. Your support helps me continue creating valuable AWS tutorial and workshop. Stay tuned for more exciting content. Thanks for watching.